Hey, welcome to Eastown Online. My name is Clint Dupin.
And my name is Michael Dupin.
It has been a long time since we've done this together.
It's been a while.
Yeah, is there a reason that you haven't been doing this?
Well, maybe that other people don't want to know.
We can talk about it later.
No.
Hey, if you've never checked in with us, we want to get to know you. Now, obviously, some of you are watching from the East Bay. Some of you are outside of the East Bay. We'd still love to connect with you. You can just simply text Easttown to 94000. And something I've been starting to say is that things are always better in the room, right? And so what that means is if you live within the East Bay area, we invite you to be with us in person. We actually are meeting in San Ramon. There's a little middle school called Iron Horse Middle School.
It's not very little.
It is. You are right. Mm-hmm. I mean, comparatively, compared to like a Yugo, like a car.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yes.
anyways, it is. It's kind of big. It's got a big Jaguar on the wall, right? But we would love to meet you in person, but we would love to also give you a gift if you check in with us right now. So,
Yeah.
Do you ever wonder why people do regrettable things? We look around at our world, at people that we admire, people that we care about, people even in leadership in the church, and all of a sudden something is revealed that was hidden in their life, and we wonder, how could that be? Or maybe the next question is this: why do we do regrettable things? It may be a decision you make that comes to light and everyone is wondering how you got there. Or it may be a reaction or a response to something, and all of a sudden you are left asking yourself, where in the world did that come from, right? People don't just wake up and say, I'm going to do something regrettable today. Listen to what Paul says in the book of Romans. He says this, he says, I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I actually do.
And why is this? It's because we're all a collection of stories and circumstances that have shaped who we are. There's wounds, there's pain that sometimes we might not even fully recall in all of its detail, but that we've never processed through and we've continued to push down way beneath the surface. Maybe you've had messages of love growing up, but we've also all had messages of shame or guilt or pain that have shaped who we are. And all of this, even if we've tried to bury it deep down, enters with us into every space that we walk into every relationship. No matter how hard we have tried to function like it's not there, if we have never truly acknowledged it and dealt with it, it's there. So what's our response? Oftentimes it's like, we don't want to deal with it, so we escape. We try to distance ourselves from it as much as we can. It's way easier to do that than to actually deal with what's there. We probably don't even realize the ways that we have covered over the pain that's deep within, what we've used to numb it or ignore it. Richard Rohr is a Franciscan priest. He's an author, and he says this: using a scapegoat is our much preferred method. We deny our pain, sins, and suffering and project them elsewhere. This ancient method still works so well that there's no reason to think that it's going to end or change. Until we are enlightened by grace, we don't even see it. It remains safely hidden in the unconscious where it plays itself out. The truth is, many of us are just barely existing, and we're relying on what are often toxic tools to keep us insulated from the pain, to keep us in avoidance of the mess we feel deep within, whether it's shopping, food, clothes, experiences, sex, influence, success, opportunities, relationships, money, alcohol, goals, approval. Like the list can just go on of the ways we escape. And when we use these escape routes, where we start with that escape route is never enough. We continue to need more and more to escape what we are avoiding.
Yeah, that's really good. A lot of the material that we're using is coming from Steve Carter's recently released book called The Thing Beneath the Thing. And Steve is this amazing leader, pastor, speaker, writer. And some of this, I'd really challenge you to read this book. We've read it and it's awesome. And so we're going to be sharing some of that. But here's what he says. He says, ultimately, we stay stuck in patterns that aren't best for us because we don't want to do the work to find a better way. But here's the thing. God is inviting every single one of us into a better way. Out of his kindness to us, he is inviting us to experience healing and wholeness. Out of his loving kindness, he is inviting us to stop working so hard to escape and cover over, to slow down, kind of push the brakes, take a look at what has been pushed below the surface, and allow his grace and healing to take root in our lives. Because God is relentless in his pursuit for our wholeness.
And I would say this throughout this series, because what Clint is saying, like that we've both read this book, as we read it, we're like, these are things that we've been processing through in this COVID season that we feel like God has been doing in our lives. And I would say this is going to take curiosity at why you do what you do and what is really going on that you might be covering over. And then here's the next thing after curiosity is it's going to take compassion and grace. Compassion and grace that you offer yourself as you process through this, and compassion and grace that you receive from a God who loves you deeply. If you do that, if you can approach this with courageous curiosity, if you can give yourself compassion and grace, here's the ROI.
Ooh.
Here's your
Roy?
return. No.
ROI.
Okay. Here's your return on investment.
Oh, that's what that means.
Is you will unlock parts of your soul and your calling that have been buried deep. Your soul, I really believe, will find peace, and your dreams for the future that maybe you haven't even been able to see will experience new life.
That's so good. And by the way, when we talk about the thing beneath the thing is actually an acronym, right? So I want to go through this real quick. The thing, right, T is triggers, and these are the things that set us off. H is hideouts, where we go and what we turn to in order to escape the pain of our stories. We're going to be talking about that next week. I is insecurities, the false stories we create about ourselves. That's so true. And then N is narratives. Now this one's going to be really, really key. The false stories we create about others. And then grace, right? G is grace, the ongoing process and spiritual power that makes us whole, holy, and spiritually healthy. So today we start with triggers. Why does something out of nowhere trigger us, right? Why does something out of nowhere trigger us? Why do we respond and react in ways that seem a little bit over the top? It's the guy that gets a little too angry at the stoplight, right? Because the pain we have shoved down has become a pothole. Now, let me talk a little bit about potholes. Now, potholes, you don't really know anything about potholes unless you have been in Michigan. Right?
True.
They were crazy. Mm-hmm. They rained the road. Like they were every single place. And here's how potholes happen is when water like kind of seeps into the cracks of the road, of the pavement, and then when it freezes, it expands and it cracks it even bigger, and the pavement begins to develop all these holes, and it's crazy. And in fact, you want to avoid certain roads in Michigan because the potholes are so bad, right? Even if it means taking longer to your destination, you would try to avoid certain roads because they were so bad. Because you knew that there was more potholes on that road, then you would take the longer route. Now, here's the trickiest part. It was at night, right? It's like you wouldn't see these holes anywhere, and then bam, right? Your car would actually hit a pothole and it would send you flying. Okay, it wouldn't send you flying, but it would actually sometimes cause immediate damage to your car. Now, sometimes the damage was immediate, but it was usually over the span of hitting pothole after pothole after pothole, and it would leave your car damaged, right? So here's the thing. I want to do this, and this is something that we haven't really done, kind of to set up what we're talking about. We're going to do this spoken word piece. Now, don't worry.
You're not doing it.
I'm not going to do it.
He's not doing it.
But this is our good friend, Frankie. I want you to listen to how he describes those potholes in our own life.
In England, residents got so fed up with their cities not repairing potholes, they decided to take matters into their own hands and fill the potholes with dirt and flowers themselves. Some may say that this is a new practice, but us humans have been doing it for thousands of years, dealing with potholes of sins, addictions, and fears, filling them with flowers and pretending that they weren't even there. Petunia-filled potholes line the city streets of our minds. While we go about life like everything else is fine, we think that that's it. As we patch them with unhealthy ways to cope, we decide to do things on our own. Instead of leaning on God's hope, trouble is brewing like an iceberg. only being able to see the surface level stuff, catastrophe is waiting just below the surface. We think that by planting flowers, things are smooth sailing, but these seas are about to get rough. You see, the thing is, once a pothole goes untreated, it turns into a sinkhole. Water gets beneath the surface and slowly erodes the good soil around it until there's nothing left but an empty shell waiting for pressure to be applied. Carnation-filled holes now harbor Chrysler Pacificas in the middle of Madison Avenue, and we no longer deal with these things until we have to. Welcome to the things beneath the things. The African nectar-filled anger, hibiscus-filled hurt, aloe-filled addiction, sage-filled sexual immorality, daisy-filled drugs, rose-filled religious trauma, daffodil-filled divorce eventually crash their ways into our lives as sin-filled sinkholes that we no longer want to deal with, that we're even more so desperate to cover up. So we run away. What we don't realize is the very places we run to, God is calling us out of the potholes of misery, mystery, and confusion, and into the promises of peace, hope, and love. God's grace comes rushing in like hot asphalt, filling the void and repairing the cracks, bringing us from sadness and depression to being overfilled with love and joy, and suddenly our potholes are no longer to be found. It's unfathomable. You find grace, peace, and love where hurt was so tangible. Now you're standing at the mountaintop when getting out of that hole was unimaginable. This, my friends, is all about giving God the things beneath the things. So let's grab a shovel and get to digging up some flowers.
We're so grateful to Frankie for using his gift to just give us a different picture of what happens when we have these potholes in our lives. These things beneath the surface that we don't deal with. Because let's be honest, if we don't deal with the thing beneath the thing, it's not just us who suffers. We often take others down with us. Like, we are created for community. We talk about this often at Eastown, and that's a super important part of our lives, and it can be a great thing. But then when everything starts to seep out of us, when we experience the damage of these potholes, something triggers us. It's like the impact does not just stay with us. It affects those that we care deeply about. What you hear us say often also at Eastown is that the things that we battle, the things that we struggle with are really nothing new. Like, this is nothing new. Throughout human history, people have been shoving those painful parts down, the places that we don't want to acknowledge, that are far too easy to ignore. We shove them down, but then we see the damage that is done. And so today we're going to look at a story from the Bible, actually from the book of Esther, about a man named Haman who did not deal with what was below the surface. And actually what we see result from it is kind of crazy.
So I want to tell you, like Michael just said, I want to talk about this story just a little bit. And we find King Xerxes and Haman, right? And we see this in the book of Esther that you were talking about. King Xerxes ruled over most of the Persian Empire, which we know now today as modern day Iran. Now, spread throughout this empire was a lot of the Jewish nation that had been exiled from Jerusalem, known as the Israelites. Now, King Xerxes had a second-hand person that just had been recently, it was like his second-hand, recently promoted. His name was Haman. Now, he was a commander under Xerxes, and he disliked the Jewish people, especially because of all their traditions and what they stood for. Now, one of the things that was customary to do when people of power, especially like Haman and Xerxes, when they would pass, people would actually bow to them because they were in a place of power. Now, stop there, just pause for a second. There was a Jewish man by the name of Mordecai, and he actually worked in the court of Xerxes, right? He had influence, and the reason he had influence is he exposed a plot to take the life of Xerxes, and Xerxes honored him for that, like appreciated him. However, Mordecai would not bow down when Haman would pass because of his personal beliefs. Now, this angered Haman. And listen to what it says here. In Esther 3:5, it says, when Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged.
So Mordecai triggered something in Haman, and Haman wanted to have him killed. But he knew that Mordecai had favor with the king, so he had to go beyond that and lie to the king and made up a story that a whole people group was not obeying the king, was not honoring the king, and plotted and got the king to agree to have the entire Jewish people wiped from the face of the earth. Now, not only were all the Jews going to be killed, but this was basically going to accomplish his goal to have Mordecai killed. Murder seems like a big response. And it wasn't even enough for Haman to have only Mordecai killed. It's like he was going to take the entire people group with him. That might seem drastic, but I believe this is a picture of what we see happen all around us when potholes are covered over, things are shoved down, and then all of a sudden they're triggered. I would say just take a look at our world over the past year and a half. Haven't we all had someone in our life that we care about, that we're close to, a friend or a family, and we have been so shocked by their response this last year? Of the statements they've made, the posts they've made, even maybe the actions that they've taken. And we've thought, where in the world did that come from? How did I never know this about this person? And maybe someone's thought the same about you. But I would say we've had back to back triggers that have set off potholes in people everywhere. The fear through a pandemic, the interruption to every area of our lives, the unknown that's ahead of us that has caused anxiety because we can't even see what the future will hold, political division, racial unrest, and the deep pain that we have seen come from racism in our nation. Trigger after trigger after trigger, to the pain, to the shame, to the deep wounds that were already there. And I would say, no wonder we've experienced what we've experienced. I would also say that we've all, myself included, been pretty short on our curiosity for why people are responding the way that they are. It is way easier to unfriend, to stop calling, to cancel them out. Because if we don't do that, if we don't cancel them and we allow them to continue to hold space in our lives, then it actually triggers the potholes even more that are deep within us. I do want to make one disclaimer here. I want you to know that I am not talking about abusive circumstances and relationships that you are in. There are circumstances that we cannot stay in and people that we need to separate ourselves from and need to get help and need to get to a place of safety. That is something different. But on the whole, it is far easier to get rid of people than to allow them to actually be the catalyst for looking at the places in our lives that have long been covered over and to see how God might be pursuing us for our healing and our wholeness. And our temptation, even after this last year and a half, is to look at the world and say, how did things get so bad? But God is inviting us to realize the same ugliness we see in the world right now is the same ugliness that can come out of us if we leave these potholes buried deep within. Now, Clint and I have been in marriage counseling since the very beginning.
Pew!
20 years. We knew right away, this is going to have to be consistent. But Jack was one of our...
It was in our nuptials.
No, you don't even know what you're saying. All right. So Jack was the counselor probably that we had for the longest when we were back in Michigan, and I loved Jack. And Clint would say that I love Jack because I think he always takes my side. And why wouldn't he always take my side? You didn't hate Jack. Right, and I don't think marriage counselors are really supposed to take sides. But I will never forget one of our sessions with him. And I came out, this did not usually happen, came out of that session so mad. I went in and I wanted to talk to Jack about how much of a button pusher that Clint was in our marriage and how much he knew the buttons to push and he knew the things that would upset me and he would do it anyway. And I was just convinced that Jack would tell Clint to stop pushing my buttons, right? But here's what Jack did. Jack did not tell Clint to stop pushing my buttons, to stop doing the things he knew that would upset me. Instead, Jack told me that it was really in my control, that it was my choice whether I allowed him to push my buttons or not. What? I was like, this is not what I was looking for. But what Jack was saying was that the more valuable way forward was not for him to tell Clint to stop pushing my buttons. The more valuable way forward was for me to pay attention to what it was triggering and to fight for wholeness and healing in those areas of my life. And this is what I believe God is inviting every single one of us to do, to fight for wholeness and healing in our lives. And he promises us, not that it will be easy, but that he will be with us in the midst of that. I love the line in Frankie's spoken word where he talks about moving from potholes to promises, moving from potholes to God's promises. This is our invitation for maybe the first time to begin to experience the reality of his promises in our life. His promises of peace, his promises of freedom, his promises to reach to the areas that we have shoved deep down and to bring healing.
So here's what I invite you to do, we invite you to do, is maybe just take some time this week, maybe even today, find a time where you can get alone, maybe for 3-5 minutes, maybe tomorrow morning, and think about where is it that you've been triggered? What is it that brings up that deep emotion? Because I know for me, when I'm not dealing with the thing beneath the thing, it feels like it's right below the surface. The thing that never used to be a trigger has now become a trigger. Like, why is it setting me off? So maybe for some of us, it's just sitting down, taking the time to figure out, what is that? Why do I get triggered? Why did I get so angry or emotional in that way, with that circumstance? Because there's no condemnation, right? Maybe for some of you, you feel really guilty about that. Or maybe you feel some type of feeling or emotion that you are kind of ashamed of. That is the enemy. That is the enemy. There is no condemnation in Christ. That means that Jesus wants to sit with you. Jesus wants to hear about it. Jesus knows it's already there. Jesus wants to heal it. And that's what we're going to be talking about all throughout this series. Let me pray for you. God, we just come to you in this moment. Lord, we know that there are some potholes in our life that we have not dealt with. Lord, we know that there's triggers that go off every now and then that reveal something deeper. Let it be an invitation for healing. And sometimes that's hard, but we know that you are with us every step of the way. You don't say, deal with that and then I'll come back to you later. You don't say, hey, you've got that issue, you're not worthy. It's like, no, I'm going to walk through it with you every step of the way. In your name, amen. Hey, thank you for being with us this week. We are so thankful for you. We're going to continue on this discussion even next week. We're going to talk about those hideouts, right? Mm-hmm. What are those escape places that we actually go to? Because you got a lot, right? I'm just kidding, but we're going to talk about that more. Hey, I just want to say this. Thank you for your generosity to Eastown. We could not do this without you. We could not be a part of something bigger that's happening in our community. We believe that what we're talking about today can bring healing and wholeness to people. And it's because of your generosity we get to do that. So thank you so much. And if you've never started your generosity journey with us, you can do that today by simply texting GIVE, GYVE, or 313131. We so much appreciate that. So we will see you next week.